This is Achieve the Possibilities with your host, Pam Hargis, business owner and Focal Point certified coach. Welcome to Effective Communication. Stop losing up to 75% of your opportunities. Today, we're going to be talking about how to effectively communicate with others. With that, you need to understand everyone's style. And then, of course, how do we listen purposefully? Lee Iacocca said, communication is everything. When we think about communication consists of your voice, that's the tone in which we use, the words or the content, and then our body language, the energy that we exude, and quite frankly, is what most people see all the time. You've heard oftentimes that when we communicate, people are actually listening with their eyes. Well, this is a big portion of communication. Today, we're going to actually be focusing more on the what I say and what people are hearing. In fact, Peter Drucker said the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said. We need to listen with our eyes, but we also need to listen to the words. Communication sometimes can feel like a tug of war, so what do we do about it? Well, when we're successful at communicating, we can expect to improve our effectiveness in communication overall, management and leadership, sales, teams and work groups, our negotiation, recruiting and selecting qualified employees, as well as our own interpersonal relationships. Effective communication is about connecting, building trust, back to that listening word again, being heard, and ultimately getting those results. Did you know that if you are communicating to everyone the same exact way, regardless of who they are, where their styles are, and where they come from, you could be losing up to 75% of your opportunities? So in other words, we need to be chameleons? Well, the biggest thing is we need to learn how do we adapt. One way to do that is by discovering behavioral styles. Now, there's a whole program that I do. It's called DISC, D-I-S-C. We're not going to be able to get into all those levels of details today, but we're going to hit around the corners of that. If you'd like to get more information on that, reach out to me and we'll be glad to set that up. Back to the behavioral styles, we need to really first understand ourselves. What are our own strengths and challenges? Then we need to be able to recognize others' styles. What are the observable languages that we hear, as well as what are they doing? And then the last piece is, again, that chameleon or adapting. Connect and build trust. All of this helps us get better results. When we think about our styles, and I mentioned the word DISC, D-I-S-C, there are different categories. There's 4 specific categories that we all fall into. Now, keep in mind, at times you may fall into one over the other based on your situation. Stress, your environment, work versus play, all of those do play a factor into this. So I'm not saying that everything is going to be extremely black and white, but it is important to be thinking about your style. So the first style we're going to talk about is D. When communicating with a person who is a D style, think about them in the sense of ambitious, forceful, decisive, strong-willed, independent, and goal-oriented. So where are you in those words? And what I'd like you to also think about is, who do you know right now that has these particular styles? So I'll give you a minute to think about that, and I'll repeat those words. Someone who is ambitious, forceful, decisive, strong-willed, independent, and goal-oriented. Well, now that you've got those people in mind, here's how you should communicate with them. Be clear, specific, brief, and to the point. Stick to business. Don't traipse off and don't get out of whack here. Be prepared with support material in a well-organized package. Now that I've said that, think about those people that you just pictured. Does that seem like them? Now, here are some factors that could create tension or dissatisfaction with those styles. When you start talking about things that are not relevant to the issue, you leave loopholes or create cloudiness around the issues, or quite frankly, don't even get to the bottom of the issue, or you appear disorganized. Those are things that are going to kind of turn those people away, and they're going to tune out. So that was the D style. The next style is S. When communicating with a person who is patient, predictable, reliable, they're steady in their way of doing things, they're relaxed and modest, those are the ones that have an S style. So just like with the Ds, I want you to think about someone that you know that is predictable, reliable, relaxed. Kind of just take a, chill kind of mode. When you communicate with those people, you want to begin with a personal comment. Break the ice. Wow, I love that color shirt on you today. Present your case softly and non-threateningly, and ask how questions to draw their opinions. A great one I like to use is, how would you react to this particular situation? Now, factors that could create tension or dissatisfaction with these type of styles are rushing headlong into business. Keep in mind, these people like to think about things. They like to mull it over. Don't be domineering or demanding. And for whatever you do, don't force them to respond quickly or make a decision quickly. Again, they want to think about it. They want to weigh out all the options. All right, we've covered D and we've covered S. Let's go into I. I like to think of I's as your cheerleaders. They're the ones who are magnetic, enthusiastic, friendly, and they love to be very demonstrative. They wear their emotions on their sleeve. You pretty much know where you stand when you're dealing with an I. So again, think about someone you know that's an I. They're out there. They're the people that are going to stand up first in a room. They're always volunteering to do things. Well, when you communicate with an I, you're going to want to provide a warm and friendly environment. Don't deal with a lot of details. It's really important that you speak in ways of feelings. You want to think about them in the sense of, how does this involve them? How can they be a part of the conversation? When you want to get an I on board with you, ask them their opinion. Boy, they won't hush. Factors that could create tension or dissatisfaction. Being curt, cold, or tight-lipped. If you want to get an I to kind of turn off from you, come across as you've got a secret or you're not really divulging everything. When you control the conversation, that's not very good with an I personality. They want to control. And do not drive on factors and figures. What you don't want to do is come across very analytical with an I personality style. They will turn away as fast as they can. The last one is a C. When communicating with a person who is a C, I want you to think about someone you may know that falls into this category. They are dependent, neat, conservative, perfectionist, careful, and very compliant. They're the ones that say, well, where does it say this in the procedures book? They're the ones that want to know the numbers, the details, your analytics. So what you want to do when you communicate with someone who is a C is prepare your case in advance. And all the numbers you can stick in there and statistics and so forth, the better. Stick to business. Don't tell stories. If you set a timeline with your C, you're going to want to stick to it and be accurate but realistic. Things that'll turn off a C are those that are giddy, casual. So in other words, you don't want to talk to a C like you talk to an I. Don't push too hard. Similar to an S, they want time to think. They want to be able to really look at the details. They're going to be the ones that research every nook and cranny about what you are proposing. And then lastly, one of the other things that turn them off are being disorganized or messy. If you can come to the presentation with a booklet that's all bound and you have one for them as well for yourself, boy, they're going to be happy campers. So The next piece of this puzzle is we've talked about listening, but now I really want to get into the listening. Keep in mind, the good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? Now, just to recap, as we went through those 4 different categories of styles, you probably thought to yourself, well, I'm this and I'm that, and I'm this and I'm that. Well, yes, at times you may revert to certain styles. Again, when you're at work, you may have to be more analytical and fall into that C category because of who you work around, who you might have to do a job for. So in essence, you're already starting to adapt your style to the person that you're working for. You may also, when you're at a party, change into an I type of style because you're at a party and everybody's out having a good time. But what we're looking at is, where do you typically fall and where do others typically fall? The one thing that I mentioned at the very beginning is that we also communicate with our eyes and we watch people. So let me give you a couple of things to look for each of these 4 categories. So when we look at someone who is an I, this is your cheerleader again. This is your dynamic person. They're going to be using their hands a lot. Their facial expressions are going to be smiling and winking and doing all kinds of things. You're going to see a huge difference with an I when they communicate. They're very animated. Similarly, a D can be animated too, but they're more reserved in that animation. One thing I like to look for is, did a D pick up their pen and they literally point to things very systematically? It's this, this, and this. Or they might even point with their finger, like 1, 2, 3. That's a great sign that you may be dealing with a D as opposed to an I. The S, they're going to be animated to some degree as well, but note that they'll probably sit back in their seat. They may be a little held back in their hands. They might be in their laps. The other thing that they might do is they might turn their head from side to side more in an inquisitive point of view because they're truly wanting to listen to you. The other thing that they do is they might put their hands up on the table and fold them. They're a very caring style, so it's one of those things that they want to demonstrate to you that they care to listen to you. The last one is the C. A C will be your note taker. They're going to be the ones that want to be very meticulous in catching every single word that you have to say. They're going to be intently looking at you and observing what are you doing and how are you saying it. I've said a lot in this last short period of time, and I want you to be able to start really paying attention. What is the person in front of me doing, and what are they saying? You can actually lose sales, quite frankly, lose employees, and lose the attention of a spouse or a loved one if you're not zoning in on how are they coming across. What are the words they're using? What is their body language? And in turn, what am I doing to be able to communicate to them? When it comes to a sales environment, you can actually lose sales if you don't quickly tune in to this style that you're presenting to. Think about it. If you are an I style, where you are a cheerleader, you're a sis boom ba rah rah type of person, and you have a C style that you're conversing with, who is very reserved. They want the numbers. You won't get anywhere in that presentation if you do not quickly adapt. So with that, I wish you all the best. And again, would like to say, if you want to learn more on DISC, and especially better understanding your style, I actually have an assessment that you can take. Very quick. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes of undivided time. It's an online assessment, but it's a great way of understanding what is your personal style. And better yet, how can you use that style to be more in control of your environment, be more productive at work, get more sales, and let's face it, just have a better way of communicating. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more how you can achieve the possibilities, please visit my website at pamhargis.focalpointcoaching.com, or feel free to call me at 386-847-8028.